Have you ever felt that politicians just don't tell the whole story? You're not alone. A shocking 73% of Americans believe that politicians lie to get elected. But why is this so common? What's really happening behind the scenes in politics? In this video, we'll dive into the uncomfortable truth that you might not want to hear: you will never see a truly honest politician. We'll explore why honesty is often sacrificed on the altar of power, popularity, and survival. Did you know that a 2018 study found that only 19% of voters say they trust political leaders? That's a stark drop from 1964, when over 75% of Americans had faith in their elected officials. We'll break down the strategies politicians use to bend the truth, from the art of spin to the pressures of party loyalty. You'll discover how scandals can turn into stepping stones and why voters often enable the very dishonesty they detest. Get ready to uncover the hidden forces that shape political honesty and learn why the truth might be too uncomfortable for us to handle. Let's dive in. Chapter 1: The myth of the perfect politician. We often hear calls for an honest politician, but let's face it, in the world of politics, purity doesn't exist. Why? Because politics is about compromise, and compromise isn't clean. The idea of a perfect, purely honest politician is a myth. According to a 2019 Pew Research study, only 17% of Americans trust the government most of the time. That's pretty low. But here's the catch: we keep voting for the same types of politicians. Why? Because politicians are skilled at telling us what we want to hear. A quote by Mark Twain sums it up well: politicians and diapers must be changed often, and for the same reason. Their job isn't to be perfect. Their job is to keep us satisfied, or at least not dissatisfied enough to throw them out. One key reason behind this is the necessity of negotiation. Imagine a politician who promised to lower taxes but found that the only way to do so was by cutting healthcare spending. They might then soften the truth, saying they'll reform healthcare without mentioning the cuts. It's not outright lying, but it's not pure honesty either. It's a necessary evil of the game. Political theorist Max Weber argued that politics is about power, not ethics. Politicians, even the good ones, can't help but get their hands dirty. Weber called this the ethic of responsibility, the need to make tough decisions, even if it means breaking promises. So, if you're looking for honesty, you might be disappointed. But before we get too cynical, remember that honesty in politics is more complex than in everyday life. A politician's honesty isn't just about telling the truth, it's about managing expectations while navigating competing interests. In other words, it's survival. Chapter 2: Behind the curtain, power, promises, and payback. Here's a harsh truth: politicians are often puppets in a larger game of power. Behind every promise, there are donors, lobbyists, and party bosses pulling the strings. And when power is on the line, promises are often negotiable. Take the example of lobbying. In 2022, over $3.8 billion was spent on lobbying in the US alone. This isn't just money thrown around for fun. Lobbyists represent powerful interests, from corporations to unions, and they expect something in return. Politicians know that to stay in office, they need these groups on their side. In his book Dark Money, journalist Jane Mayer exposed how billionaires secretly influence political campaigns. One striking example is the Koch brothers, who spent over $889 million on the 2016 election cycle. This money buys influence, and politicians often find themselves bending to the wishes of these donors. But it's not just about the cash. Party politics also plays a massive role. To get anything done, a politician needs the backing of their party. This means towing the party line, even when it conflicts with personal beliefs. Remember the time when Senator John McCain famously broke with his party during the 2017 healthcare vote? It's a rare moment in politics, and it shows how difficult it is to go against the grain. Politicians also have to navigate a web of relationships with interest groups. These groups help them get elected, and in return, they expect politicians to advocate for their causes. So, when a politician promises to fight for the people, they're often also fighting for the interests of a select few behind the scenes. Chapter 3: The Spin Cycle: How Lies Become Palatable. Politicians are masters of spin. They don't always lie outright, instead, they bend the truth just enough to make it more palatable. This is where political language comes into play. And it's fascinating how words can be twisted to fit a narrative. George Orwell, in his essay Politics and the English Language, said it best: political language is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable. Politicians use language to shape reality. For instance, collateral damage sounds a lot more acceptable than civilian deaths, doesn't it? It's a subtle way of hiding uncomfortable truths behind softer words. Take unemployment rates as an example. If a politician says, unemployment is down, it sounds great, right? But they may not mention that the jobs created are part-time or low-wage. This selective use of facts isn't technically a lie, but it sure isn't the whole truth either. There's also the strategy of deflection. When politicians are caught in a scandal, their first move is often to distract the public. Remember when President Bill Clinton deflected attention from his personal scandals by focusing on policy achievements? It's not just about avoiding the truth, it's about redirecting attention to something more favorable. Another common tactic is to inflate numbers to make policies seem more successful than they are. A 2020 study by the Brennan Center found that many politicians, when discussing crime statistics, cherry-pick data to make their arguments stronger. If violent crime dropped in one specific area, that's the stat they'll promote, ignoring overall trends that might tell a different story. Even the timing of announcements is strategic. Bad news often gets buried on a Friday, when fewer people are paying attention. It's called the Friday news dump, and it's a tried and true method to control the narrative. In short, politicians have mastered the art of telling half-truths and using language to manipulate perceptions. It's not always about what they say, it's about how they say it. And often, that subtle difference is what makes their spin so effective. If you're enjoying this discussion on political honesty and manipulation, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more insights into the world of politics. Chapter 4: Truth versus Popularity. The electability dilemma. Politicians face a constant battle between telling the truth and staying popular. Honesty doesn't always win votes. In fact, telling people the hard truths can be a fast way to lose an election. This is what's known as the electability dilemma. A politician may know that cutting social programs is necessary for balancing the budget. But imagine standing up in front of a crowd and saying, "I'm going to cut Medicare." That's political suicide. So, instead, they might say, "We need to reform Medicare to make it sustainable for future generations." It sounds better, doesn't it? This isn't a lie, but it hides the uncomfortable reality. A 2018 study from the American Political Science Review found that voters are more likely to elect candidates who make vague promises rather than those who offer detailed, specific plans. The more a politician tries to be straightforward, the riskier it gets. Voters like promises, but not necessarily the truth behind them. Take climate change. Politicians might acknowledge it in principle, but many avoid talking about the sacrifices needed to tackle it. Why? Because telling voters they need to pay higher taxes for green energy or drive less isn't exactly popular. A 2021 poll by the Pew Research Center showed that while 60% of Americans believe climate change should be a priority, only 38% support policies that would significantly impact their daily lives. Politicians who do speak hard truths often face backlash. Think about Jimmy Carter's 1979 crisis of confidence speech. He bluntly told Americans that they were partly to blame for the country's energy problems. The speech was honest, but it cost him dearly. His approval ratings plummeted, and he lost the next election to Ronald Reagan, who sold optimism instead. This dilemma explains why politicians tend to stick to safe, popular promises. They're not just running a campaign, they're running a balancing act between honesty and electability. It's a game where saying the right thing often beats saying the true thing. If you found this exploration into political honesty engaging, make sure to subscribe for more thought-provoking content and insights into the world of politics.